We need lights.
Oh.
Does it matter? I just want to see that.
It's fine. Your face kind of glows.
Yeah, so Alex is right. Well, that's like Good evening. We are really grateful you're here, especially to the students who might not have left campus yet. We hope to have supplied you a slightly nutritious dinner back there, carrot cake, so please eat that. Kind of. But we're excited to be a part of this amazing momentum that you and your family have engaged upon entering the senior year, the last year at Nido. There's so much that is going on this year. Of course, the university process being one of the central pillars of this experience. So thank you very much for coming tonight to help orient everyone who's going to be on this critical team to get your kids where it is they would like to go. So, who we are, for those of you who have not met us yet, my name is Heather Marks. I'm in my second year at Nido. I am the grade 12 academic advisor and a university advisor for those students interested in going to the United States. I do other counseling related work and support the testing side of things related to the ACT and AP exams, and you might be familiar with some of those letters. Before coming to Nido, I was born and raised in California, went to undergraduate at Stanford University and studied human biology. I did my graduate work at the University of Michigan and studied ecology and botany. I'm actually a scientist by training, but have been doing education ever since. I've been a high school math and science teacher, a director of advancement. You might know that there's an advancement team coming on at Nido. And then been doing college counseling for, the past 7 years. I lived most of my adult life in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I helped found the first K-12 school in the state and was there for 18 years, doing all these things. Delighted to be at Nido, super happy to be a part of your family's journey to college.
My name is Ian Lally. At Nido, my roles are World University Counselor, University Coordinator. That means that I'm in charge of all universities in the world outside of Chile and the United States. I also have to frequently compare those university systems, but I'm in charge of all those countries outside of those too. I'm the academic advisor for 11th grade. Also do social emotional counseling for 9 through 12 like Ms. Heather does. I'm also the career counselor here, mostly because world university systems, a lot of world university systems are more career oriented than the US system. So that role goes neatly with my world university title. And then also I do PSAT and SAT, supervisor for those testing. We just split the difference between the two of us. I grew up in Connecticut. Storrs, Connecticut was my hometown, so if anyone knows UConn, University of Connecticut, that's where I grew up. I went to undergraduate at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I studied social thought and political economy, an interdisciplinary major. If any of you are interested in interdisciplinary majors, you can talk to me more. And also I went to graduate school at the University of Connecticut, where I studied counseling psychology and school counseling. And I've been a school counselor ever since. This is my 11th year being a school counselor. I might look young, but I've been doing this thing for a while. Before coming to Nido, I was in New York City for 2 years, and then I went to Berlin, Germany for 5 years, and this is my 5th year at Nido. So I have lots to hopefully share with you tonight, and just sort of in the spirit of everything, I wanted to say that we are at a time where the counseling program is definitely in transition in terms of college counseling. We're excited about the new initiatives we're doing, and hopefully making everyone's life a little bit less stressful is one of our main goals.
Your kids know this, we kind of always, we always start with this. start and refer to it all the time. These are the values from really which we counsel always. Just as a quick reminder about where our decisions coming from. Of course, we have deep experience, professionally connected, but we are particularly invested in these values of the counseling program at Nido, in that every student is unique. That's not to say that they're collecting unique activities, but that we treat each student's journey through Nido and beyond as an individualized experience. So you might have multiple children in this school, they might have older siblings who have done this. We are happy to know what that context was, but we are going to make sure that we start fresh and focus it on what it is that your child is interested in. The primary goal is not getting in. I feel like sometimes the whole agenda is to get in, mark it off, enroll, and you're done. And in fact, the whole point is leveraging that opportunity, fitting in and being a success there when there are so many options. And it's so important to make this choice as thoughtfully and intentionally as possible. So we focus exclusively on fit. Students we put in the center of this process, which is actually will be highlighted this evening. Everybody will go away saying, wow, actually my child has the most number of responsibilities between now and the time they go to college. Let's step back and see how they deal with those responsibilities. You and I, parents, we're not going to college. Your kids are. But the whole goal in the same process, of which there is complexity and uncertainty and demands and deadlines, it's all about confidence building. It's not to actually somehow attach their ego and self-worth to something that is externally generated. In the process, they're getting to know themselves better and like themselves more, despite what the world has to say. Did you get in or didn't you? You're going to like yourself at the end of the day because you spent the time reflecting and have been surrounded by people who believe in you. And then finally, since it's not just Mr. Lally and I and your child, everything, all of their success depends upon the support and guidance and trust you place in them. And the way that we can all work together is if we stay in communication. We are in better communication with students than we have ever been, based on some new initiatives about a university seminar in the schedule, meeting students during flex time. We have so much more connection, and good communication is better for everyone.
Okay, so our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk about just some real nuts and bolts. We're going to use the format of the evening is going to be the senior university agreement, whether it be the World University Agreement or the US bound one, and that'll be really the format of the night. We're going to do that agreement because most of you have done it. Some of you haven't done it. That's okay. If you haven't done it, don't worry about it. But please do it still. It's important. And we're going to go through why we made university agreement and why we haven't used it in the past. Also, this is a very different philosophy of counseling in terms of university counseling that we're doing now at Nido. So if you've had older brothers or sisters or older students that have gone through a different process, maybe they haven't had as much what we call working groups, kids who have similar application responsibilities, working together, also working during study hall or during our university counseling class. But we are trying to group students in ways that they can feel support from each other, rather than it being a one-on-one delivery system. Rather than that, having it be much more of a group system, whether you're applying to a foreign country or even applying to your passport country. Then we're going to do a breakout groups for Q&A. And I'll take the World University people to usually the back of the room and take out some chairs and sit in a circle and talk about what World University questions you might have. And then the US people will be up front with Ms. Heather talking about Q&A for USA. If you're split between the two, you're not quite sure which one to go to, go to whichever one you feel less comfortable about. If you have more questions for your World University concerns, come back with me. Don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. If you really have any questions or need to make an appointment, we're always open and available for that. But it's just more of what's your orientation, what's more your focus. If the US is your first choice, and you have some other World University things later on, but really the US is your first choice, I recommend staying up here. If you have World University is your first choice, and maybe you're just applying to a couple of US universities, you kind of know that already, maybe your older son or daughter has already done that, then come back to the World University circle. Okay? In terms of our changing philosophy, on that note, if your son or daughter isn't part of this university class, don't worry, we haven't forgotten about them. They won't necessarily get any worse service than they did in the past. This is a pilot program. We're testing out how to infuse the college process in more part of the student's day. If your son or daughter also has a study hall, they will be as part of a working group for a university study, so they'll be getting the benefits as if they're in the class to begin with. If they don't have either of those options, don't worry, we also know who they are, and they will be part of a group as well. We'll just make sure that they get in on some of the work we're going to do, which is why we have that flex time now during the day, which including lunch will add up to be over 80 minutes of time that we can spend with groups of students who aren't in either of those two categories. Is there a question?
Yes, there is. You said, what if you're between USA and the world? What if you're between USA and, let's say, going to university in Chile?
Well, we only present towards non-Chilean universities because Chilean universities work on a different cycle. So you'll be oriented to the Chilean university cycle after your student graduates, because it's all based on PSU score and NAME score, which is really Ms. Paz-Aguach, who's in charge of that. So then you're a U.S. person. So in terms of orientation, the Chilean system is relatively straightforward in terms of college placement counseling, and that all happens nicely out of cycle for the rest of the world's university stuff. So you'll be well oriented to that towards second semester with Ms. Paz, and also going towards when she has her PSU class. There's a lot that goes into it there. So that's really where you get your Chilean university orientation.
Okay. We're going to start, we've got three, again, parties in play here who have specific responsibilities and roles to play to make all this happen in the end. And the punchline is, folks, that it does all work out, but there is a lot of working and moving parts that need to come together. All these kind of bullet or numbered responsibilities are all about action items. The whole junior year was about orientation to the process, exploration, no doubt. Students are still researching colleges now, exploring essay topics and things. The kids are, it's time to do things, execute, implement, complete, and meet deadlines that are slowly marching their way towards us in the upcoming semester. The deadlines are unforgiving, so we need to make sure everybody's up, kind of out in front of it and never feels that they were taken by surprise. So you'll hear us, this is one of the ways we are going to remind everybody about things, but then there'll be flex time in class and emails about, we're going to try to make it so there's really no way you could avoid understanding kind of what's on the horizon and what to do to prepare. So students, focus and also share this with the folks that are here, but this is probably not stuff you are unfamiliar with, but here we are again. And just so parents you understand, they have two slides, I think 11 total responsibilities that are far fewer than the other parties. So again, the student is the star of the show. I really ask that you step back and let your student do the work. It's going to help you understand what their skin in the game really is. It's easy to say, I want to go to school here or there. Their actions will show you how serious they are about that, because you're going to make a really significant financial and emotional investment to make this happen. You got to step up to the plate. But first, before all the details and the stress, this is the first thing I want you to do about this process again. It's really about discovering who you are, genuinely, authentically engaged. You're not creating some persona to apply to college. This is about authentic reflection. Step up and take the lead, and if at all possible, you heard the seniors in the panel today, try in some way to maintain balance. Have one foot in the here and now, enjoy being a senior, your family and friends, but at the same time, you have to set your sights on what's coming next. But this is a good skill to practice, right, for the rest of your life. That's really the underpinnings of what we believe the university process to be, not to collect some number of acceptances at the end. You will have kind of taken these skills with you at the end of the day, saying, that's what I got out of the college process.
I think it's important also to note for anybody who wonders, it's really not, Ms. Heather over there doing the U.S. stuff and me doing the rest of the world and us not communicating about it. We really make, if at all possible, to combine our goals of World University process, both U.S. and including Chile in that mix as well. So we really do believe that a lot of these points that we're talking about apply to everyone, really regardless of where you're applying. So we do jump in and say, this is, there are distinct differences, but honestly, we really try to do our best to make overarching philosophies that include everybody.
So So some of these are just housekeeping items, like number 2, but it's super important. Like if you have not spent your entire high school career at Nido, we need to make sure that in our office, Ms. Ali needs your official transcripts from your previous school. We're responsible for sending all of that on to college. Students that ended up at the deadline and they realize their 9th grade transcript is nowhere to be found. That takes time to request, to generate, to translate if possible. That is something actually we cannot request on your behalf. You own those records, and you, as parents, need to request them from your previous school.
Is it only the high school one?
Only high school, that's correct, grades 9 through 12, are the records that you'll need to send on. Okay? So that's super important. Some of the students are perking up their ears like, we know who you are, but you gotta get it done. Ms. Ale will also remind you to say that we don't have your records yet. Yes, ma'am?
Question. What if the child happens to want to do US, Canada, and Australia, for example?
Yeah.
Who would be their lead person?
It depends. We have what's called a primary destination, primary location. So if your first choice is the U.S., then you're primarily a U.S.-bound student, with the others being secondary. If they are truly tied, which is frequently unusual, but does happen year to year, a group of students, some students are actually tied with who takes what, and then we go based on process. So based on process, just in case anyone's wondering, for Australia particularly, all of my students who are going for Australia, at least for this year, are going to go second semester. There's really no advantage to applying the first semester to Australia. Aussies are more and more picky about kids not applying early. They kind of don't want to look at your application until second semester. So we go based on process. The U.S. process has some really firm deadlines that are first semester. So the U.S. process will always go first unless you're applying to the UK or another World University system where you have to write a personal statement.
Like Canada, for example? That's
Canada, you do not write a personal statement largely for almost every major outside of optometry, dentistry, some engineering programs, but not frequently anymore, particularly if you're a non-Canadian passport holder. But basically Canada is going to wait as well. Now, they'll be part of a Canadian working group. I mean, I'm working with my Canadian applicants now, but there's strategy involved also with World University. The thing about the U.S. process is that everyone's on the same train. When you're on the U.S. process, everyone gets on, everyone pretty much does the same thing. Okay, there's a little differences here and there in terms of forms that you have to fill out based on your passport, but everyone's doing the same process. Once you get to World University, it's very mixed. What your deadlines are, depending upon what your passport is, depending upon what you want to study. So the World University thing gets pretty complicated really quickly. And that's why we front load it and have you do the U.S. process as early as possible, especially if that is your focus. If you're thinking about the U.S. as being maybe second or third, I would encourage your student to actually think about whether they even want to apply to the U.S. If you have a good Australian school and that school is highly ranked and you know you're going to get the score that's necessary to get in there, I would question why you're even applying to the U.S. to begin with if it's your first choice. So that's where we have that negotiation where I try and say, look, if you don't have first choice country at this point, let's try and make one for you. Because if you, I think not having a first choice country can kind of leave you without a compass a little bit. Does that make sense to you? All right.
Agreed. Naviance, this is something, yet another thing I feel like students need to really pay attention to now, in addition to haiku, in addition to all this stuff. Seniors need to be on Naviance like all the time, paying attention to messages that come through, data that's on there, and the most important thing is that students have agreed to maintain their college lists in there, because Naviance is actually the tool we use to submit official documents on your behalf when applications are due. You might have heard they also are filling out the common application, those who are applying to U.S. schools. That's exciting, and that's actually separate, and yet another thing you've had to log into and create an account. And they actually apply through Common App, but they need to maintain their Naviance list, because that's actually how all school officials work with colleges. So anyway, I definitely have had kids say, I applied to school, And these are actually based on like actual examples that have happened to us, so we're trying to get out in front of all like the possible things that happen. Oh, I applied, why didn't you submit my transcripts? What do you mean? I don't see it on your list. I can't. They applied through the Common App and never told me they're Naviance. So we'll continue to do that.
Oh, and also, Naviance is super important for World University kids too. That's how I track what universities you're applying to in which countries, especially if your strategies are conflicting with depending upon which country you apply to. So World University kids as well, make sure you update and maintain your Naviance list too. Super important.
This is based on best practice and kind of, you know, experience at Nido. And this might seem somewhat artificial, but it actually is, it has played out well. We're actually making a recommendation about the maximum number of schools and the suggested maximum number of countries that students should apply to. If we are truly counseling from a position of fit, if a student is interested in applying to 25 institutions, it makes us question whether that student has done some serious self-reflection and understands what it is that they feel is a good fit for them in an institution. So one, and also I think it will work them to death. No students have no energy to apply to College 20 and write a viable essay, right? They've run out of gas. And then to be quite honest, applying to more than 10 schools, for which you only can attend one, that's the important part, you can't submit at 5 and then make your choice, is that it's appropriate for everyone because, to be quite honest, in addition to competing with global applicants, you need to make sure that you're being honest and supportive of students at Nido. Rather than throwing applications about to all schools, you may in fact alter an opportunity that another student really wants to attend their top choice school, but you've thrown it on as an extra because of any number of reasons, but that wasn't an authentic use of your application, and therefore you might have altered the outcomes, perhaps, of another Nido student. It benefits all students to keep applications down from a quality standpoint and from a competitive standpoint. And Mr. Lally can say something a little bit about the country situation.
Yeah, so a note on the knocking out or the competition in terms of world universities, it's much less of a problem, but I do also tell students, hey, look, if you're never going to go there, you're taking a spot from some other kid in the world, which I think is somewhat, you know, an ethical choice that you're making as well. Obviously, if you might want to go there, great, but you're not throwing on applications just to see whether or not you get in, right? This is a process that you're, you know, serious, or there could be a percentage chance that you go to that place. These, in terms of 10 schools, just so everyone's on the same page about it, the UC system only counts as 1. So even if you apply to multiple universities in that, it only counts as 1. The UCAS system, where you can apply to 5 universities in the UK, that also only counts as 1. So we've done a lot of thinking in terms of, you know, what would be a good maximum number of students, applications being sent out. And then that no more than 4 countries, that includes your, that does not include your passport country. So for example, if you're thinking of Chile plus 3 others, you know, that's only 3. And Chile doesn't count in that number. I do think that, you know, personally speaking, I always like it when students have, you know, an option their passport country if that's important to them. And so I always leave that to the side. You know, if you're going to your passport country and that's your only one, great. If you're applying to a bunch of other, you know, world university systems and then also applying to Chile, I don't count that as 1 because I think that having a passport country to keep as an option is a good thing and shouldn't count as an outside application.
Whenever we decided to put boundaries like this, I always wanted to vet it out, so I was actually in the States 2 weeks doing business related to university work, and I kind of vetted this out. Starting at the top, with the most elite institutions that are most selective, I said, does it matter to you if a high school says they have instituted some kind of policy or limit or suggestion based on the number of colleges to which, or universities to which kids can apply? And the answer was hands down, yes. I said, why? They said, well, if we know that you've asked them to narrow their choices, we actually know then we are a viable potential yield. Colleges are doing a couple of things. Out of the tens of thousands of extra applicants they have, they are trying to somehow figure out who is most likely to enroll. If they know that students from Nido are applying to 10 schools, they feel like they're really legitimately in the game if they're any one of those 10. If they guess that there isn't a limit and therefore you might have applied to 20, they really have no idea or no reason to believe why you would attend their university over the 19 others you may or may not get into. So it actually helps them. You're actually demonstrating interest if you are attending a school that asks you to make these kind of fit choices up front. Did I see a hand in the back? Yes.
What's the average number of applications that you've seen from Nido over the last 3, 4, 5 years? Is it somewhere around
well,
8, 7?
It wasn't that high last year.
No, we had as many, in the time I've been here, as many as 700. Or
For a whole class.
For a whole class. Are you asking for individual students?
Yeah,
Per
per
student.
student, so it's less than that.
Oh, yeah. No, our average per applicant per student is around 6. The reason is that, in the US, you have, certain standards, and Ms. Heather doesn't necessarily do it this way, but, people are familiar with the 3-3-3, safety, middle, target, reach, or 2-2-2, that sort of thing. In the World University sense, you don't need to apply to nearly as many schools. It's frequent that World University students going to Europe, going to Australia, going to Canada will not apply to more than 3, as 3 being somewhat the maximum. And then I have a lot of students who are focused in on European schools, particularly the Netherlands, but they only apply to 1. So keeping the application numbers down is not necessarily the overall goal, but that's just the natural impact of having more information to students earlier on so they can make a more informed choice about which country, region, or university they want to go to. Because we like to try and also match students. So if a student is applying to 10 very different institutions, that's as much as a red flag for us as more applications that are trying to get more applications than that. Because if you're applying to that wide variety of places where they have such a different philosophy, then we feel like, perhaps you haven't been oriented, or maybe you haven't been reflective enough to say, why does this institution fit me? And that's just as important for, passport country return kids as it is for students who are going to the US or other world universities.
And then finally, what's super important is that in addition to our support, students are going to be asking for the support of their teachers who know them well, to elaborate, bring to life their academic work. They do not need to belabor the point they got this grade or work hard. That's kind of a foregone conclusion, but it's about who are they in class, who are they inside their brain, and so they are responsible for requesting letters of recommendation, and we'll talk about why shortly. So letters of recommendation, they're going to be asking for 2 academic teachers at NITO if you're on the US side, and will work with me if they believe a 3rd person, either inside NITO or out, can write them a letter of support that is different enough to merit the request. Because in the US process, less is truly more. If you give admissions office 1 piece of paper that's redundant and you make them read it, they're going to be sad. Because that times tens of thousands of extra letters of recommendation that didn't share anything new. So I help kids decipher whether it's worthwhile or not just to add another piece of paper. And then,
Totally.
and then the letters of recommendation is very different on the World University side.
Right, so don't ask your teachers for a letter of recommendation if you don't need one on the World University side. More and more World Universities, even ones that are holistic and selective, like the Dutch University process, for example, if they say they don't require a letter of recommendation, they used to be like nice and kind of read it, and now they just like throw them away. So don't ask your teachers to do it unless you're serious about it. However, I will say that if your passport country that you're returning to, or the World University system you're going towards does not require a letter of recommendation, do seek out a teacher and ask them to give you a reference at some point. You will need a reference at some point, okay? Anyone who's going to Australia, if you want to live in a dormitory, you have to apply that dormitory and get a letter of recommendation to go into that dorm. There's a lot of those things like that, especially also if you want to share a flat. I just got a frantic email today. Mister, please give me a reference for my apartment. I'm here right now. I'm trying to get it, right? So for those of you who's like, yeah, Mom keeps talking about this letter of recommendation thing, but I don't need one because I'm going wherever where they don't require one. Yes, that's true. They don't require one yet. But you never know when you might need one, so go to that teacher and be like, hey, I'm going to need one at some point. Is it okay if I ask you, email you, perhaps I'll be at university and I want a job? Frequently, for passport country return kids or other World University students, if you want to go get a job, you need a letter of recommendation. That can help a lot. If you want a flat, it's almost necessary to have one. So go and ask that teacher. Identify that person. Don't be that guy who emails frantically your last 5 years of teachers that you have trying to get someone to send you a reference in 24 hours. It doesn't go over so well. So identify them early and say, I don't need it for university, but I may be emailing you in the future in case I need it.
Ian,
Just.
does that mean that the Naviance program is active after they graduate? Like,
Good question. So the
If
Naviance.
the letter's sitting in there, they can contact you and you can retrieve it?
Correct, exactly. So the database of letters that we have in Naviance stays there, it rolls over. We have a certain amount of megabytes that we can have uploaded on the cloud system that they have. So once that letter is in there, it stays there. But it is important to note that not every teacher will upload their letter, particularly for non-US applicants. If you're a non-US applicant, teachers don't frequently upload to Naviance. So that's one of those things where, Mr. Lally keeps the archive for you.
Okay, so students, hopefully none of that is a surprise. Parents, you don't have to do any of that. Just kind of support them and rah-rah. Here are just a few more. Students should register. Please, parents, do not register your kids for exams. It's super easy, straightforward. This is something your kids have to do on their own. You do need to let them borrow a credit card. You can stand and watch while they do it, but you do not need to do it for them. They need to get onto their accounts either through the ACT, the SAT, or the TOEFL and register themselves for the test that suits them. And then, in addition to preparing for and sitting those particular exams, when the time comes, closer to application deadlines, before the semester is up, they will be responsible for submitting those scores officially to every institution to which they apply. On many applications, they get to do something called self-report, fill in a bunch of fields which they can self-report scores, but it's, again, hopefully they're telling the truth. Colleges won't make a complete decision on their file unless they receive official transcripts from NITO and official test scores from the institution, or the testing companies. There is no relationship between their transcript and their test scores. We don't print them on there. Even if we did, they wouldn't be official. I can't tell you, over the years, it happens every year. A student thinks, NITO, some magical person at NITO, sometimes me, that I'm going to somehow submit their test scores. I can't access your account. I have no idea what your username is. If I were to call the college board on your behalf, they wouldn't even talk to me. Nor would they talk to you. The student needs to get on the phone. So nonetheless, it's super easy. They log on in the same way they register through a certain link. You would click a link called Send Your Scores. You also need to give them a credit card. It's going to cost about $12 to send. But nonetheless, the students are responsible for submitting all those scores, and I will say this ad nauseum when the time comes.
Are you still recommending that students not take the SAT?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Sorry, we're going to carry this through your whole year.
We'll keep watching the news for positive news, but as now.
Well, I don't know if you read about it, but there's a massive security breach of the new SAT already.
Already.
Massive.
Yeah.
They shut down Asia. They have canceled testing dates, and they've already said that the new SATs that have been issued are actually probably invalid.
Oh,
It's total disaster.
Speaking of that system, just quickly before I take those questions, anyone who's here thinking about particularly Asian university systems, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, China as well, you should pay attention to all the US stuff, because your application processes are very, very linked to the US process. They basically just took the US process and kind of changed it around a little bit, but pretty much you're going to have to do all of the things that US kids have to do, and then some. It's usually, I call it the US plus, right? So anything you have to do for the US, you have to do that, then you have to do more than that, right? So any of you who are looking at those world university systems, please perk up your ears when you hear that US thing. And it also perhaps might be to your benefit to listen particularly to personal statement advice that Ms. Heather has, different things. Obviously, I'll orient you towards that. It's not a big deal. It's not something you have to be stressed about. But just when we're talking about US process stuff, any of my Asia-bound applicants who are interested in those, check out the US stuff, because it's very, very, very closely related. So you're first.
Yeah, I had a question about when we're supposed to send our ACT scores. Would it be before we submit the Common App or after we submit?
After. You can do that after. I would wait till all your scores are in. If you're testing before December, you can wait to see them and then decide, depending upon the testing policy of any institution, what's the most strategic thing to do. But I would wait. Those two things, actually, all the components coming from the various parties can arrive at any institution in any particular order. The minute they receive the first thing, they open a file. I could send your transcripts right now. They would open a file and wait to see if an application arrives. Maybe it doesn't. You submit your Common App, then they wait for my transcript and the test scores. Ultimately, it all needs to be there by the deadline in order for your application to be considered.
So before November 1st?
Correct.
Okay.
So before November 1st, or whatever deadline you're shooting for.
Okay.
Yeah.
About SATs that get canceled, does that affect the university?
Probably not. Again, it's so awesome to be in Chile for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And we don't have any of the scandal that is engulfing Asia in testing. So no, but be glad that you are not living in Thailand or Korea or nothing. None of that has reached our continent.
And you are looking at the only 2 testing supervisors for the entire country, right here. So
We
if
are
something
very-
happened, we will know about it.
We are
Because it
maintaining
would
the
happen
integrity of our
at your
test center. Yes, ma'am.
For the US, what do you suggest, SAT and what?
Well, we're actually, we've been saying since the beginning, since your kids are in a bizarre cycle where the SAT has been reissued, we've generally been advising against the SAT.
After the SAT, what above, except for the SAT, what other exams are you suggesting?
ACT. The ACT.
Oh, ACT
What
would
is
be,
the ACT versus SAT?
that, can we follow up with that, after this meeting?
Q&A.
Q&A, perfect, we'll do that. And I can explain that to you and we can get there. So, and your students are actually very well aware as they're refining their research about what tests are required. That's also their responsibility about what is required for that institution. For the US, they are 100% interchangeable, SAT, ACT. Some may require SAT subject tests for the most elite institutions. And for every international student, every non-US passport holder, you must take the TOEFL or the IELTS, but mostly TOEFL for the US to demonstrate English proficiency. And if you're a crossover candidate, you would follow Mr. Lally.
Yeah, and World Universities, it works the same way. You can take the SAT or the ACT. We're recommending that students stick with the ACT for the time being, just because we think that it more accurately represents what you learn at Nido. And you're a little bit more, we feel there's a greater probability that you'll have an advantage on the ACT versus the SAT, which is still going through its infancy stages. And we had a big picture of a guinea pig up there last 11th grade meeting, if you guys recall. Big picture of a guinea pig. Don't be guinea pig. So that was our thing. You know, not that there's anything wrong with taking it, being the first class to ever go to a World University or a US university with the test. But, you know, we don't like to roll the dice on kids, so we say take a test that's been normal for a long time, so it's the ACT. But for World University kids, you know, it can be a little bit of a strategy thing. US kids, very, pretty much straightforward, go for the ACT.
Okay, so what else? So then, so submit all the applications by the deadlines. That's super duper important. It's a little bit challenging because I'm only in my first cycle. It's really hard to be on summer break when actually most deadlines are doing if you're on the regular rounds for US colleges. So we will stay on top of deadlines, but it's the students that's responsible for submitting those. Last year, first time ever it's happened to me, a parent, actually the deadline had passed and I looked and the student missed the Common App. They didn't submit their Common App. So I followed up and they said, oh, I thought you were doing that. So I need to realize I need to say this more and more. Your student is responsible for submitting any application, whether it's a common application, an individual school's application, online, whatever. You submit them. We submit official documents to support them, but they are going to click submit and pay the fee that is often associated with that. Many universities, thankfully, accept electronic documents, which makes our lives really easy. There's 2. All application reading happens online now. Back in the Parents' Day, they actually literally read a piece of paper. Now everybody's got 10 terminals and they're reading all online. But some universities, individually, and then big systems like the University of California, of all things, wants things sent hard copy. So kids need to understand which ones are those. You need to work with Miss Ale in the counseling office to arrange for a courier service to pay $20 to get it there via courier on time. That's not something I do, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so, and Naviance helps your kids do that. It's not a mystery. There's a nice graphic symbol about paper or not.
For World University students, you're going to know whether or not you have to submit documents via paper because they'll tell you. Largely speaking, almost everyone takes it via email now in the World University systems, or it's automatically done through your IB scores. However, there are some exceptions to that, particularly Asian universities are really picky about paper. They like their paper. So you have to definitely do it if you're going towards any Asian universities. You're going to have a mountain of paper that will help you produce. And then also on top of that, there are some European university systems that get a little picky and want their pieces of paper certified, stamped, and all that stuff. but it's few and far between. It's becoming less and less of a trend.
And then finally, we have a couple of deadlines coming up, which we'll talk about, but there is some version of this idea of various times in which you can apply, based on your first choice school, your qualifications, etc. Would you like to apply earlier in the calendar year versus regular, etc.? The US system has a very distinct difference between early deadlines and regular. Many colleges and many kids in this class are considering something called early decision, which means you have a top choice university which parents agree to afford, because if you get in, you're going. That's it. And that's sometimes an important strategy to take. But in order to do that, actually kids, their parents, and I actually need to sign an agreement saying we actually understand what this buying actually means from all of our perspectives. And there was a student last year at Nido who went early decision, and then his parents said, well, we're not sure that you should go there. I think we're just going to break our agreement. This thing isn't really a legal contract in the US. However, there are some really significant consequences that affect the student that everybody should understand before we enter into some of this. What happens is the universities talk. They actually all share early lists. Who applied where and who got in where. One, they can see if kids double dipped. It's unethical to apply to 2 places early decision. You can see why, right? If you get in, you're bound to go. You can't do that to 2 places. So they actually cross-list that. Then they decide to see who they share lists about who they take. And then if you decide to say, I'm really not sure about this university, I want my chances at university not A but B, they will know that you've broken agreement there and basically blacklist your child, and your child will likely get in nowhere. So that's the impact that they have on the students. Very serious. Secondly, you kick the can down the road, and I do think you'll have an impact on Nido. Because if you don't pay the consequence now, they are going to actually wonder how well I've counseled students and parents about what this means, and will be less likely to trust an ED candidate in the future, and potentially, deny your application. So this is just a very important commitment that is a big part of the US system, but it's not one to be taken lightly by students or parents. And every meeting is required with me in order to take that path, because of exactly, the student was totally into it. The student was totally crushed that dad decided it wasn't for them, and I was able to communicate the negative impacts, and everybody went to where they should have gone. But it was just that not everybody was on the same page of what it meant. It seems it's not something to be taken lightly. So.
Can you apply to an early decision and an early action?
You can.
Okay.
You can. So there's a binding early agreement and then another early action arrangement where you would like to tell a school, you're my top choice, I'm really interested, I want to apply now and know a little bit early, but I'm not required to go. And that's what would happen is that if you got into your early decision school, you would politely withdraw, saying thank you so much. Please do not consider my application because I am attending this other institution.
Does anyone be applying if you have other world institutions? So if you're applying ED to a US school and you have other world universities, once you get into that school, I'm ethically obligated to pull you out of all your other school options. And it's also can be strategic, like I said before, some students aren't even taking on the safety process, maybe even their idea of taking on Australia or another application world university system. And I encourage them, especially if you're doing ED, just do a second semester if you do a first semester, because then you don't have that mix up of heart and feelings about the schools and all that stuff.
So yeah, ED is, just to say it again, is never a strategy to play the field. Like, let me just see if I can get, if you can get in more. It's just so much more than that. So, and then finally, this is, kind of at the very, very end, but this is super important to know on the Naviance side. It's really important to keep Naviance up to date when decision time comes. I can't tell you how hard it is for me when people come up and say, oh wow, or an admissions rep will call, oh wow, so-and-so got in. And I'm like, really? Universities don't tell me that students get in, they tell you. I love to celebrate with you. So as soon as possible, share with me decisions as they come out. And then finally, there is a very strict obligation for students to enroll in one university. This is all best practices business, bad juju to play the game. So I'm going to, again, continue to advise students to enroll in one institution, pay a deposit to reserve your spot, and politely decline and say thank you to those other schools that you had as a choice. So, that's it, students. So this is your big thing. We're kind of taking you from now to the end about some key, there are many steps in between, but as you can see, the students have a lot to keep track of with our support, and they have a lot of work to do in order to advance their particular process.
So, family responsibilities. Don't worry, Mom and Dad, these ones are more, as we call in counseling, social emotional, right? Less nitty gritty. Guide and support and trust your son or daughter, really important, part of the process. We are taking the philosophy that a student is trying to find the best fit match for their, the next 3 or 4 or more years of their life. So trust and support your kid. Let them take the lead on it, you know? If you're getting nervous about whether or not they're doing what they should be doing, and you're just frantic and you have to talk to someone about it, come talk to us about it. We're really good at helping to direct that conversation in a positive direction rather than perhaps somewhat of a negative downward spiral that happens. It's like, oh, it's like a test, leave me alone. Right? So come to us and get some good guidance perhaps about how to let them take the lead, but also, you know, put on the positive parent pressure at the same time, because there's always place and time for that too. Okay? Keep an open mind about what a good university is. A lot of parents are sort of struggling about, you know, what's a good ranked university. Okay? That has a lot of different, it's a very loaded term, what is a good school, right? So there's different levels to that, especially on the World University side. Is it known regionally? Is that important to you? Is it known in your passport country? Is that important to you? Is it known globally? Because you don't know whether or not your son or daughter will be in, you know, China or will be in California. So you have to know, that your university is going to be well known in every country in the world. Whatever level is important to you, that is a factor in university, but not the factor in university. Because, right, once again, we're trying to say what's good for the kid, what they're going to feel most comfortable in, what program they're going to do well in, rather than, hopefully, the rank driving the process. Obviously, parents are concerned the value for money and all that good stuff, but we really do our best to think about that as well. It's almost like if you put the goal of the good fit first, the other things that are required will go along with that. And we really truly believe that that does happen. And also, just so that everybody knows, we don't suggest bad universities. So, we won't suggest something to your son or daughter that's bad anyway. We've done that sort for you. And then you see 4, 5, and 6, unfortunately, are part of your job. Pay. For all required exams. Unless your son or daughter has a job, in which case I encourage you to force them to pay. But those of you that don't have that, pay for all required exams, pay for application fees, submit documents on time, preferably. And also, and we also have another pay for all required enrollment fees. Now, a note on the whole financial topic. We really encourage you to do this super early. We talk about it at the 9th and 10th grade night. We talked about it at 11th grade night. But there's always kids that, walk across that stage when they graduate thinking they're going to one university system and their parents tell them they're actually going to another system, okay? And that may be, for financial reasons, may be beyond your control. Emergencies happen, right? But if you can have the financial conversation with your son or daughter early, do it. And now is definitely the time. We already haven't had it. I'd be sending, particularly the World University kids, or making, competitive choice options. I will say, what's your budget? And if a kid looks at me like, budget? What does that mean? Then I'll be like, have you had a conversation with your parents about whether or not cost is a factor? I only say it's cost a factor. Some kids say, no, cost isn't a factor. I'm like, great, moving on. So we don't need to talk about it, right? But if it is, and it usually is somewhere in there, even if the student doesn't believe it is, so definitely have a conversation with your son or daughter if you haven't already about what the budget is. And also be honest. Yeah, if grandma and grandpa is going to pay for the whole thing, don't worry about it, right? Have that conversation. Say, grandma and grandpa is going to pay for it. We're good. If there isn't that, and it's a year-to-year thing, try to have as open and honest a conversation as possible. We see a lot of hopes and dreams be crushed, and we would prefer to do that crushing lightly and early, right? Before
So much less.
they apply. That's way easier than that kid has already bought the sweatshirt, put the acceptance letter on their wall, and is like, I'm going there, Mom, right? That's much less, that's a lot harder to deal with. And we just have the understanding implications for early decision application. With that, we make a big deal of early decision, but we have to on the front end. It's a really big topic of conversation, particularly in the U.S., but also as it relates to other world university systems. So it's good for everybody involved. If you go through the process, you do well, you go to your school, it's awesome. But breaking that agreement is becoming more and more of a big no-no. Yeah.
For early action, the whole meeting with the parents is not necessary.
Correct, because you don't sign an agreement, it's non-binding.
Yep. And so that everyone's aware, largely the entire rest of the world, the ED doesn't exist. So there's no. There's a question here. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. If there is an option to have a non-binding action, why will you do an early decision? What is the main difference?
They actually occur, the deadlines are exactly the same, let's say for the US, November 1st. Early action and early decision applications are the same. The nature of the program is completely different. It's a guaranteed yield for the school. They are actually admitting upwards of 50% of their freshman class in the early rounds. Why? Because seats are in the bottoms are in the chairs.
Right.
The budget is being met, right? So they're actually at the most selective institutions, an admissions advantage to the student if they are well qualified. Right? So those kind of sky-high, super difficult institutions to get into are slightly less difficult to get into early rounds. The pool is smaller, it tends to be more competitive, but they know you're going to yield and you might have an opportunity to go. So that's the main difference. And it means that you, your parents, and the counselor have made a commitment. And often, I have to say, from a financial point of view, who ends up in the early pool, because you do not get to look at your financial aid award and negotiate it or decline it and say that's actually not going to work for my family. It's generally kids who can full pay or generally kids who have full need, and they're going to give you a full ride anyway. People in between are generally not good candidates for the early decision rounds.